I think it goes without saying at this point that I'm a pretty massive Five Nights at Freddy's fan. Oh, I haven't actually done that many FNAF related videos on the channel yet. Huh, well, let's change that today. Now, all the way back since 2015, almost since the very inception of the franchise itself, yes, that far back when Pink Guy was an accepted theory in the fanbase, FNAF has remained my favorite video game franchise by like a huge margin. From its challenging gameplay to its unforgettable atmosphere and jump scares, from memorizing all 10 bajillion of its characters by this point to collecting the merchandise, from listening to the great music that's arisen from this IP, to getting a migraine trying to piece together the series' unorganized and confusing lore before eventually giving up. FNAF managed to capture my interest to an insane degree, and most importantly of all to mention, if it weren't for these games, I wouldn't have discovered so many incredible people from the fanbase. Scott Cawthon's creations have truly changed my life for the better, and have always been there for me in my darkest times of need.
O cholera, czy to Freddy Fazbear?
So I want you all to keep that in mind when watching this video. So, the FNAF movie, huh? Kinda big deal, right? 8 years, folks. 8 years I spent waiting for this juggernaut of a film to release. That's almost half of my entire lifetime. Really puts things into perspective, doesn't it?
My God, has it been that long?
I think we all know by now that this film was stuck in production hell for almost a decade, ever since it was first announced back in 2015. It was originally under Warner Brothers distribution before getting picked up by Blumhouse, with plenty of producers, writers, and directors leaving the project over time. Scripts were being rejected and reworked, usually by Scott himself. And now, after all the troubles and delays, all the speculation and fan ideas, it's finally a fully fledged, legitimate feature film. Audiences have mostly eaten it up, while critics have lambasted it. Yeah, we have another Mario movie situation on our hands, even down to some of the fans saying, "Oh, they just don't get it, the movie wasn't made for the silly critics, it was made solely for us." Like, people, listen, trust me, I get it, I understand your frustrations, none of us want to see FNAF represented like this. But if the film didn't succeed at appealing to the people who didn't previously have an encyclopedic knowledge of the franchise like us, then is that really their fault? Anyways, the fact that this movie actually got released is nothing short of a miracle. I'm still struggling to process that it even exists myself. For ages, the FNAF movie has remained this elusive urban legend, a far-fetched fantasy that we'd all like to see come into fruition, but seemingly just never ever does. But then some promising and hopeful news started coming out, teasers were being dropped, and soon after I avoided any more trailers and leaks to avoid spoilers. You all know the drill by now. And on Friday, October 27th, me and my family hit up our local Imagine, tickets in hand, and I was ready for Freddy. With posters lit up on advertisements, though I now understand why there weren't any cardboard displays anywhere, our pizza delivered in a special Fazbear box, and the fans were absolutely flooding the place in droves. They were everywhere with their costumes and plushies. One man was even fully dressed in a purple police suit. It was seriously such a magical, exciting, and surreal time to be a FNAF fan, watching everyone unite together for such a big event. As for the movie experience itself, other than some kid next to me who kept coughing, I had a genuinely fun time seeing so many of the elements from the series make their way into a Hollywood blockbuster. It almost didn't feel real. I could already detect some issues and things that didn't sit right with me or make sense while watching, but I actually walked out of that theater pretty happy. And after seeing it again with a friend of mine and having some time to think about it, I think I'm finally ready to share with you all my thoughts on the FNAF movie. But first, here is the plot. Five Nights at Freddy's follows troubled security guard Mike Schmidt as he searches for a new job to both keep himself going and to maintain custody over his younger sister Abby, who he now looks after, to his dreadful aunt's dismay. He lands a job as night watchman at Freddy Fazbear's pizza place and uses his downtime to better understand what happened on the day he lost his younger brother Garrett to a kidnapper. Mike later meets a police officer named Vanessa, who tells him the terrible truth of what happened in this whimsical place long ago. He protects his sister from the clutches of the haunted robots roaming the pizzeria, and encounters the monster who kidnapped his brother all those years ago, Mr. William Afton himself. And by the end, Mike learns to move on from his past and more so appreciate what he has now, which is a fitting enough lesson for a character to learn in a FNAF movie. Okay, now on to the review portion of the video. Firstly, and most importantly, stretching out such a simple point-and-click survival horror video game, or condensing years of game, book, and teaser lore and turning it into an almost 2-hour story, is either way a challenge that I do not envy the writers for. If you were to ask me many years ago how I would have wanted this movie to play out, I would have responded with something like, I would like it to go through the entire deep story of all the games bit by bit, covering everything. But as time went on, the more I began to understand that doing so would be overcomplicated at best and incomprehensible at worst. It's no secret that FNAF lore has been, for a long time now, a confusing and sometimes frustrating mess to even keep track of or make sense of. So for the sake of this film's structure, and for the sake of making any sense to newcomers considering this is meant to be a sort of reboot story, it's best to keep the scope of things nice and simple, and for the most part, the movie did in fact stick to that mentality, which I appreciate. It adapts the very first game while adding the best bits and pieces from all across the board to tell its own fresh start-over remixed story, with its own original ideas to boot. It also, thankfully, doesn't ever really dip its toes into the utterly absurd sci-fi elements that the series is now unfortunately known for, like scoopers or remnant or time-traveling ball pits or digital consciousness transference blah 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 blah, don't ask. I do have quite a few gripes with the story, however. The dream sequences where Mike's trying to learn more about what happened on the day he lost his brother just got repetitive, up until the end where things finally started getting really intense. I definitely would have preferred in its place some more fending off the robots while being stuck inside a claustrophobic office, which we surprisingly barely even got any of here. Like, seriously, that was like the main gameplay mechanic in the original games. Closing the doors, flashing your flashlight, using the audio, checking the cameras, etc. The movie's core and focus is constantly shifting from one idea to another, while not developing those ideas to make much sense or give the film its own identity. And several story decisions like that ultimately made the film feel somewhat incomplete and over-reliant on its audience doing their homework before watching it. There are also noticeably a few lapses in logic and annoying plot conveniences that you just have to roll with. Something that also really bothers me is the film's incessant need to explain certain things so blatantly and casually, instead of steadily revealing them as the story goes along, which I believe has to be chalked up to Scotty C not being a very experienced film writer, and dare I say it, just not being a very good writer in general. The characters as well seem pretty desensitized to several of the events that occur and the information that's dropped on them. Oh, these children were killed years ago when their bodies were stuffed into the suits, haunting them to this day? Not really gonna do much of anything about that. Oh, my awful aunt was freaking murdered, I think, in my very own home? Not really gonna acknowledge that again. No wonder a lot of the film didn't leave an emotional impact on critics. Also, what's the deal with the random diamond ring and Chia Pet commercials? Why weren't these about something more relevant to the franchise or used as foreshadowing? Is there something here I'm missing? It's just so random. There are, however, many little touches to the story that I do really like, such as Mike beating the snot out of the dad at the start, which at first seems odd and unwarranted, but is later confirmed to be Mike mistaking the man grabbing hold of his son as a child abduction situation, due to the event of his younger brother getting kidnapped, leaving some mental and emotional scars on him. Or how about the missing children's faces fading in the background, hinting at how they're losing trace of their identities and turning into the monsters William wants them to be? Or the setup and payoff done with the significance of the drawings, conveying the truth of what happened to the kids? Or the whole "that's two jobs" callback?
That's two things.
Of which both times are spoken directly to William himself. Or the one fan service element that I will get to later. But a lot of it is dragged down by what I take issue with. There is a slight lack of a strong connection between Mike and the robots themselves within the film as it currently stands, other than the robots wanting to make Abby into a robot as well. So imagine if Mike's brother was actually one of the 5 missing children, or an extra add-on 6th child being kidnapped at Fazbear's. It would give Mike a more personal reason for working at this place specifically, as opposed to William just hiring him because he recognized him. Not to mention how on-brand it would be considering the events that occur in the game series. And then it would be followed by a twist where it's revealed to Mikey that Garrett was stuffed into a robot suit himself, now haunting it, forcing Michael to literally face his past in a way he didn't expect. And then again by meeting the killer himself. It's really frustrating that they didn't take advantage of that, but perhaps they're saving that idea to be followed up on in a sequel. Maybe Garrett will be the puppet in the next movie, who knows. It's just a shame that they didn't do that here, since it would have made the film feel more complete and satisfying. But enough bitching. Let's now get to the stars of the literal show, the Animatronics. Sweet heavens to Betsy, these things are phenomenal. Getting to witness these icons I've loved for so long.
Foxy, Bonnie, Chica, and Freddy.
Up on the big screen was so surreal, and they look great as well, as if they were plucked straight out of the renders of the games and brought into real life, complete with that soft outer texture and sense of mechanical believability to their movements. The Jim Henson Creature Shop should really pat themselves on the back here. Well done, guys. And yeah, they unsurprisingly steal every scene that they're in. I do unfortunately have some gripes with them as well. Let's first address the Orville elephant in the room, that being the red eyes. A lot of fans were very vocal about their disliking of them, as they just came across as very corny in comparison to the classic, far more eerie and effective black eyes with little glowing white pupils. And while it didn't end up bothering me too much in the final product, it does tie into something that does actually bug me. That being how the animatronics are too anthropomorphized in this, sometimes to a cartoony, campy degree. The squinting and angry eyebrows come across as very try-hard and kinda dopey. I do like that they explored the fact that there are still indeed children controlling them at the end of the day, but they feel like they express too much emotion when trying to be creepy, especially for a series where you could never really tell what the animatronics were thinking when stalking you, or at least that's how it used to be. Then of course there's the big-lipped alligator moment, the fort building montage. Now, I actually found this scene quite wholesome since the animatronics have had no children to play with for so long up until Abby showed up, but it really muddied the tone for me, and I feel like they should have had this scene earlier on before the audience realizes just how threatening the robots can truly be. There's also just some little things that disappointed me even as a FNAF fan. Golden Freddy especially I was expecting more from. I do love his presence during his big scene, but it would have hit harder if he had gotten to confront William during the climax, putting the Spring Bonnie mask onto his head instead of Willie doing it to himself. Or if we had gotten some explanation on him as he's deactivated in the maintenance room or something, establishing his existence for the average moviegoer who has no idea what he even is, or that this blonde kid is supposed to be him. I know Golden Freddy was elusive and mysterious in the games as well, but if you're gonna have him actively progress the plot, a little bit of explaining sure would be nice. A lot of fans were also worried about the film's PG-13 rating because, while yes, FNAF has always had a gigantic portion of its fans consisting of young teens and kids, for better or for worse in some cases, nor was it ever too outright explicit or gory in its presentation of violence most of the time, but the implications of its story are still incredibly dark and disturbing, and there are creative ways to work around the restrictions of your rating. Blumhouse's Megan proves that idea correct. But it's clear they cowered out on some of the scares here or just weren't allowed to really go all the way with them. There are still some thrills and things that did catch me off guard and justify the rating, like the bits of blood used on occasion, the robots wanting to sacrifice Abby, the Freddy face blender saw thing, which, by the way, gets no explanation, Foxy creepily doing his humming and charging down the hallway, and the dude's face getting gnawed off, probably the most gruesome thing in the whole movie, and the list goes on. But too often they stick to the cupcake doing the heavy lifting or cut away or hide a lot of the kills, and it also doesn't help that most of the killing occurs to the bad guys who we kinda want to see get attacked, which really dilutes a lot of the fear factor involving the survival of the main characters, but I guess that's just par for the course when it comes to Universal films these days. The jump scares are few and far between, and not enough in the film really gave me that sense of Cawthon-style, uncomfortable ambiance. Where are those raspy breath noises? Where is Freddy's distant laugh? Why wasn't there ever a moment where the power goes out and Freddy does his famous Toreador March jingle? You know, dun 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 dun. Why wasn't that included anywhere? For a horror film, it really could have tried a lot harder to be legitimately scary, but hey, look on the bright side, it's still a lot more frightening than Base Security Breach. As for the characters and the actors playing them, Josh Hutcherson did a really good job bringing the faceless and stinky Mike Schmidt to life. I actually bought the dynamic between him and Piper Rubio thanks to how good the child actors are, but most of everyone else was either just fine enough or honestly kinda forgettable. The lawyer named Doug, though, is an absolute treasure. Please bring him back for FNAF 2. We stan Doug around these parts. And how can I forget about Matthew Lillard as the purple guy, the man behind the slaughter himself, William Afton.
I always come.
The most common complaint I've heard regarding him is that the movie definitely needed more of his presence for his big reveal at the end to be more impactful, and yes, I do agree with that. I think he was handled pretty well near the beginning, behaving suspiciously upon reading Mike's name aloud, and reaching out to him via a phone guy call, but his sudden return in the climax was quite jarring and out of nowhere, especially from an outsider's perspective who would just view him as some random guy from the opening. Not to mention his direction and dialogue was a bit too cheesy and over the top for my liking, which is not a new thing for his character, let's be real. The most immersion-breaking moment for me was definitely his infamous line of,
I always come back.
which I know every fan loved, but still, it's very out of place. Even William undergoing the spring lock failure, while painful looking, still felt very held back, and again, over the top compared to what we could have gotten. Now, I'm gonna go a bit off track and say that yes, I loved the intro with the panicked night guard getting killed off, along with the opening credits showcasing the pizzeria's backstory in an 8-bit style, reminiscent of those original minigames the series is known for. But before I even saw the film, I knew it would have been so much more effective if it had started off with a flashback of the pizzeria still in operation, with the 5 children being lured into the back room by the evil man in the yellow bunny suit, making it all the more a shock when he physically returns and we learn who was under the mask. Because in the current version, Vanessa just slaps Mike with this big exposition dump all about it pretty late in the film, and then Shaggy just sorta pops up without a very clear reason why he's only coming back now all of a sudden. I do like him trying to maintain control of the kids though, along with the robots surrounding him, dragging him into the back room so he can rot away in the Spring Bonnie suit, as Golden Freddy's spirit closes the door on him as the film comes to an end. Could have been really chilling stuff if it were just simply built up to better. As for the production values, the pizzeria set looks so good here, with so much detail everywhere you look. The music, as well by the Newton Brothers, slaps. The sound design is usually pretty on point, despite the lack of several essential FNAF sound effects. But what really sours the film down for me atmosphere-wise is the occasionally flat direction, plus the dull lighting and color grading outside of the pizzeria, which is shocking to me considering how visually striking this series can be, though there are some interesting and dynamic shots sprinkled throughout, so I have to give him credit for that. Now, if you haven't noticed yet, I've intentionally saved the least important yet obviously most fun element of the film for last, that being the countless fan service, Easter eggs, and references to the series tossed in. These are obviously what excited fans the most, and the objective best of them all in my opinion was the book about Dream Theory, which at first I thought was just going to be some quick tongue-in-cheek dig at a very controversial theory amongst the fan base, but no, they actually used it as a setup for later events of the story, with Mike utilizing his dreams to better understand his past. That's actually kinda excellent, and there's far more where that came from, such as the Magic Rainbow Ice Cream Parlor, the weird Ella doll suit, the Employee of the Month board. My entire theater erupted with laughter and clapping at the Matt Pat and Corey Kenshin cameos, as they rightfully should. Congratulations on making it in, guys, I love ya. I was straight up cheering when they played the Living Tombstone song once the credits hit. Bruh, they even named a diner after and created a spare robot suit based off of the Sparky the Dog hoax from way back in the day. Like, come on. The fan service stuff that is actually present in here is fantastic, most of the time. I just think Scott prioritized this element of the film a bit too much over creating a comprehensive story.
Well, that's no fun. You do realize that lunch is the most important meal of the day.
Thought it was breakfast.
Some people say that, but you know, it's just a theory.
He said it! He said it!
So there you have it, folks. My thoughts on the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. Gosh, I cannot believe I just said those words after waiting so long to do so. My opinion on it will likely fluctuate as time goes on, hopefully for the better once all the hype has calmed down. Perhaps many of my issues with it will eventually subside, though I'm not holding my breath. Yet, despite all of its shortcomings and pitfalls, I really don't hate it, far from it. Like I said earlier, I came out of that cinema with a big grin on my face, knowing that I liked it more than this disappointment, and knowing that my favorite video game characters and concepts had finally been represented in the biggest way imaginable. Was it the film of my dreams that fully justified the 8-year waiting period, while stomaching through all the divisive and ridiculous turns this franchise has taken along the way? Probably not. But am I happy that it exists? Undeniably yes. This was clearly a labor of love and passion from everyone involved, made to respect the series' legacy and deliver on something the fanbase would have wanted, and not just made as an easy cash grab, or at least I hope not. Which is possibly what the film would have been had it come out back in 2016 or so. And I'm so proud of Scott Cawthon for coming such a long way with transforming his once last-ditch effort at game development into something so monumentally gigantic and cherished. Watching the entire fandom collectively come together for such an anticipated release like this is something that I'll forever hold closely to my heart. And if the majority of fans liked it, then that's what truly matters most of all to me at the end of the day. I genuinely doubt that this will be the last time we see Freddy and the gang on the big screen, considering the immense success of this film from a financial and audience standpoint, and the rumors going around of a planned sequel, if not a whole trilogy, along with Scott making it clear that he's open to taking notes from the criticisms that this film has garnered, and will use them to improve his next work. Another movie is pretty much inevitable at this point. And I'd be down for another one because, frankly, I'm still hopeful and optimistic for the future of this series, both movie-wise and game-wise. My interest in it hasn't been diminished at the fault of this film's shortcomings. 'Tis a shame the same cannot be said about another beloved IP. Fingers crossed that Scott will just listen to the actually valid criticism, and there won't be any "you can't kill off the good guys" rule in the next movie, and that they'll be able to deliver a tighter, more focused, creepier story next time. But for me right now though, I think I'm gonna go grab myself a slice of mediocre pizza and a cup of Fizzy Faz soda. Thank you all for watching this video, and I'll see you all on the flip side. Here's to happy holidays and a happy new year. Oh, wait a minute. I almost forgot one last thing.
Was that the bite?